Overt slavery comes in the form of uh, things like chattel slavery, which we saw in this country back a couple hundred years ago in the colonial days and all the way up through the Civil War era period. That is very easy to recognize as slavery because the beings who are being held in captivity are held there by direct, active, visible violence. They're being held in that position by weaponry, by people with weaponry, those who are actively claiming openly to be their owners. And they and the other people who are witnessing the situation overtly can see that this is a scenario where certain beings are claiming to own other beings, and those beings who are being claimed to be property are not free to do as they please, even if they are not harming someone else, if they're not initiating aggression or harm against another being. So it's very easy to see, for human beings to see and recognize overt forms of slavery. When we're talking about the form of slavery that is the largest form of slavery that is active today, we're not talking about overt slavery. Does overt slavery continue to exist in our world? Absolutely, yes, it does. Unfortunately, in certain places, in many places, and that's horrifically deplorable, and that practice should not be allowed to continue. It should be stopped by any amount of force necessary to stop it wherever it's taking place. But what we're largely talking about in an event such as this, and in the freedom movement in general, for those who do deeply understand slavery, there is a form of slavery that is a little bit, or for many people, much harder to see, much more difficult to perceive, and that is covert slavery. Covert slavery works through mental forms of manipulation to get the people who are having a claim of ownership made upon their person or their property, their body or their property, um, to influence them to believe that that situation is acceptable, justifiable, or even moral, or even necessary, that it must be that way and it must continue. And this is the most dangerous form of slavery. Covert slavery is even a more devastatingly dangerous form of slavery, because in overt slavery, no one with a sensible moral compass actually believes that the situation is justifiable. I would certainly hope that today, in today's world, with the information that is available, no one believes that genuinely one being has the right to go and capture and enslave and put to work as they see fit another human being. And if they did, they're pretty psychopathic. They're psychopaths out in the open. Most people don't believe that overt slavery is moral or justifiable. They know that it is violence. They know that it is a wrong behavior that should not be conducted against anyone. The problem lies in covert slavery. Covert slavery convinces people that the situation that is actually a violent scenario where people are being held under the threat, the continued threat of violence, which is called duress, if they do not obey the commands of the master class, the those who are making the claims of ownership, um, that physical violence will be done to the people who do not obey those dictates, those commands that they call laws. And the form of covert slavery that is active in our world today, called government, convinces people that the situation that they are unjustly being held under, which is duress, is not only okay, is not only justifiable, that it is actually moral and necessary to prevent some form of chaos or destruction or implosion, or collapse of society from happening. When in fact, that is all brainwashing, that is all propaganda, that is all social engineering that has been done to people since birth to get them to believe that that violent and immoral scenario is actually a moral one that is actually necessary to continue. And that's the most dangerous form of slavery there is, as far as I am concerned. And that is because in an overt form of slavery, you could ask people, do those people have the right to do that type of violence to other people and hold them in that condition and hold them under that form of continued threat of violence? And again, the vast overwhelming majority of human beings are going to say, absolutely not, they don't have such a right. That is thuggery. That is absolute violence. But then if you ask people, well, does government have a right to exist, and do they have the rights that they claim that they have over other people as authorities? You know, people will go, oh, absolutely they do. So the social engineer class of beings that runs this whole structure of our world has convinced the vast majority of human beings that covert slavery is perfectly acceptable, that all the forms of violence conducted in that system of covert slavery is just justifiable and even moral and even necessary. And it's because people don't go down to fundamental first principles and apply the action, the behavior to themselves. This is what people have a problem, an issue, a block of some kind. You could call it a mental virus of some sort that has been installed in their psyche. They have some block about applying a behavior that other people are doing, often even to them, to their own selves, to apply that behavior to themselves and ask themselves the question, if you performed this behavior, would you consider that you were doing a moral action? And would it be okay and would it be justifiable if you performed that behavior? This is the missing link that most people in the world do not do. They do not envision the scenario. They don't visualize the scenario reversed. If you were doing this to another human being, what behavior would you expect back from that individual upon yourself? Would you expect them to defend themselves? Would you expect, possibly deadly force used against you, or you to take this kind of violent behavior? And that's the reason they don't really see the behavior for what it is. They've had installed into their psyche and into their mental processes malware. It's like computer malware. It's a virus, and that virus is the basis of all forms of modern covert slavery, and that virus is called authority. The belief in authority is what prevents most people in the modern day from perceiving covert slavery as slavery. The right to issue commands of compliance to other beings, that you must do this behavior. Well, what are you going to do the behavior with? You're not going to do the behavior with a magic wand, You're going to do the behavior with your body, right? So if I claim that your actions must comply to my demands, then I am indirectly making a second claim. I am making the covert, indirect claim that what you perform with your body is not up to you. It is up to me to decide that behavior, and then I command it upon you, and then I do violence to you, or I send people to do violence to you if you don't comply with that command. Okay, so what am I indirectly claiming ownership of? I'm not just claiming ownership of your actions, because indirectly, by proxy, if I claim ownership of your actions, I must claim ownership of your body, because that is what you perform your actions with. So that is why all forms of authority, all forms of issuance of commands to other people is a claim of ownership upon the body, and it is therefore slavery. If you simply look at what government is not suggestions to other people. Government is commands of compliance through laws created by lawmaking bodies of people. claiming to be authorities who can create law and bind that law upon other people, therefore making the claim of ownership over their behavior and thus their bodies. By definition, logically, that we just followed the logical sequence of philosophical progression of what the actual behaviors are, what the actual definitions of the words are, and therefore, by definition, definitively, factually, and objectively, government not only is slavery, by definition of authority, which is what government claims, it must be slavery. And therefore, it is an immoral situation. It is a situation by which people are held under the threat of violence and duress. And therefore, that immoral situation should not be allowed to continue and stand. It must be ended by human beings who claim to be moral beings and who claim to have a moral compass.